Herakles, son of Zeus, ancestor of kings, and a hero unmatched in the sacred stories of classical Greece. The myth of Herakles has stood the test of time, still having a cultural impact on the world today. But to the ancient Greeks, Herakles wasn't a myth. Rather, he was as real as the land they lived upon, and his story was not just for entertainment. Like many of the sacred stories told throughout classical Greece, it contained lessons to be followed by all Greek citizens. The faults of man and women, what actions were right and wrong, and the consequences of said actions. Lessons that would have major impacts on Greek society for years to come. A theme prominent throughout Herakles' story was the reflection of what was right and wrong within Greek society. Often, Herakles would commit acts deemed improper in classical Greece and was punished accordingly. Herakles' acts of rage led to the death of many of those around him, including his music teacher, wife, and children. For the later two, after consulting the Oracle of Delphi, Herakles was punished by being ordered to complete 10 labours for King Eurystheus. This punishment for Herakles' actions taught the people of Greece that their own misdeeds would have consequences, either from mortals of higher status or from the gods. After the completion of his labours, Herakles revisited the Oracle of Delphi. Unfortunately, his improper deeds had led to the Oracle of Delphi refusing to give Herakles the advice he sought from her. In an act of rage, Herakles attempted to steal the sacred tripod of Apollo. When a fight broke out between the two sons of Zeus, it was their father who ended their squabble with a well-placed lightning bolt. Once again, Herakles was punished for his misdeed. This time, under the orders of Zeus, Herakles was sold into slavery for 3 years. But whilst Herakles had committed many misdeeds, what makes his story unique, even amongst other Greek heroes, is the scale of the reward he received for repenting for his wrongdoings. Through his respectful acts to the gods and acceptance of his punishment, Herakles achieved an act unlike any other mortal. After Herakles died and his body was being burnt on Mount Oida, Zeus raised his immortal soul to the top of Mount Olympus where he would live with the rest of the Greek gods. While such a reward would have been impossible if not for Herakles being the son of Zeus, its lesson of rewards for good deeds was an incredibly important lesson for the people of Greece. Herakles avoided damaging the possessions of the gods, whether it be Cerberus, the apples of Hesperides, or the golden hide of Artemis. This respect for the gods and determination to right one's wrongs were traits that were considered to be of high value in classical Greece. But what's right and wrong wasn't the only theme in the story of Herakles relevant to Greek society. While less prominent in the story, the women that appear throughout Herakles' story often reflect how the ancient Greeks viewed women as a whole. Be it the goddess Hera or his own wife Deianira, the women in Herakles' life were of constant hindrance to him. An important lesson taught in Herakles' story was taught through the examples of what would happen if women were given power. This can be seen through Hera, wife of Zeus. Because Herakles was Zeus' illegitimate child, Hera had a hatred for him. This irrational hate was not uncommon for Hera, nor were her actions caused by her hate for Herakles. Hera sent snakes to Herakles as a child, pushed Herakles to kill his own wife and children, and guided the Oracle of Delphi to tell Herakles to complete the 10 labours. Whilst these punishments aren't particularly unusual for a deity to exact upon mortals, the reasoning behind them was Hera's justifications for her actions were irrational, a trait associated with women and bad leaders. This warned the people of Greece that women should not be given too much power, and if they did, the women would use it for ignoble deeds. Another trait associated with women in Greek society was their lack of intelligence, and nowhere is this more prevalent in Herakles' story than when his wife, Deianira, caused the hero's death. When the centaur Nessus attempted to steal Deianira away, Herakles killed him using his bow. Right before his death, Nessus convinced Deianira to give Herakles his tunic. What Nessus chose not to tell Deianira was that the tunic was soaked in the poisonous blood of the Hydra, which Herakles had dipped his arrows in. When Deianira finally gave Herakles the tunic, it caused his death. Thus, the idiotic and gullible nature that the Greeks associated with women was reflected through Deianira. The story of Herakles is unlike any other. His feats and triumphs dwarf those of any other mortal, but even the life of Herakles shares a common goal with much of classical Greek sacred stories, to educate the people of Greece. It is through Herakles' story that the concept of right and wrong and the consequences of one's actions is taught. Such an important idea is what keeps a society together. Many of the Polai of Greece were ahead of their time in terms of ethics, and a part of this was because they believed that if they did wrong, then there would be consequences. But even for all their progressiveness, the Polai of classical Greece still viewed women negatively. Herakles' story reflects these views of women, teaching the men of Greece that they are full of faults. Herakles' story is full of these lessons to be shared throughout classical Greece. From the children of Athens to the men of Sparta, all of those who resided in classical Greece could learn from the story of Herakles.